Hey there, so before we get into the main meat of the video, I just wanted to tell you guys that I have an audience survey that I was hoping you guys could take. I put it up on the community tab a few days ago, and I'm also putting it in the top comment of this video, as well as in the description. The survey is so I can learn more about my audience and get some insights that the analytics don't give me, and help me create a future content strategy for the channel. So, if you'd be so kind as to take the survey, that would be really appreciated. Now, on to the content of the video. I have another video I'm working on and it's not quite ready yet, so instead I'm giving you this video. Around the corner from my house, there is a home that has a yard sale about 3 or 4 times a year. And in this yard sale is nothing but books. And a lot of the books behind me in that library you see there came from that yard sale over the years. I've been going there for, oh gosh, at least a decade now, probably more. And that's where I get a big chunk of my library. So I just had another haul from that, so I thought, hey, let's do a haul video, because that's what history channels are supposed to do, right? Okay, so let's break up these books into what sections they're going to be going into in my library. And this first section is the primary sources section. The first going into the primary sources section is The Lives of Saints from the Penguin Classics. This is a very old copy. It has the Voyage of St. Brendan, Bede's Life of Cuthbert, and the Edda's Life of Wilfrid. Now, many of the ancient saint stories are often considered to be fabrications, but considering that this is an old medieval text, I usually just put that kind of stuff in the primary sources, even though not all primary sources are equally reliable, as mentioned in an episode of Historian Essentials. In similar vein to that, adding to my primary source section is the Penguin edition of the Iliad. And I figured, well, I don't have a hard copy of this, I have some digital copies, but I didn't have a hard copy, and I thought I could really use a hard copy for my section, and that'll be filling out a role in my ancient Greek primary source section. And rounding out the primary source section is the Journals of Lewis and Clark, edited by Bernard DeVoto. So this will be going into the American history segment of my primary sources library. This next segment is for books that will be going into my religious history section, and this one's pretty short. I have From the Stone Age to Christianity, Monotheism and the Historical Process by William Foxwell Albright. This thing, this is another old one. It's from the 50s, and yeah, I've seen the name Albright in other books I've read before, so I figure, okay, add one of these to my library. And the other one is Bible, the Story of the King James Version by Gordon Campbell, published by Oxford. And this thing, it's pretty much what it says in the tin. It's a history of the King James Version of the Bible, published in 2011, so it's at least up to that point, hopefully. Next we move on to the European history section of my library. We'll be starting with The Mediterranean and the Mediterranean World in the Age of Philip II by Fernand Braudel. And for those of you who might not know, Fernand Braudel in this particular set of books is what inspired that Annales School of History, which I did a Historian Essentials on last year. So yeah, this is a useful volume. This is volume 2. I have volume 1 in my library, and so now I have both, or at least the first 2. I don't know if there's a volume 3 or 4 in this set. Following that up, we have The European Intellectual History Since Darwin and Marx, edited by W. Warren Wager. So I'm guessing that this is actually a collection of primary sources. I just finally read the whole thing. I didn't realize that it might have actually been a collection of primary sources. And nope, it is not a collection of primary sources, but rather a collection of essays about these topics. Okay, okay, good, then I had it in the right section. We then have Russia Under the Bolshevik Regime by Richard Pipes. So in the coming year, I'm gonna have a lot of stuff on communism and the Soviet Union, because I want to do some anti-communist stuff in the future, and so this will be used for much of that. In fact, I might actually have a use for it in a video coming up in the not too distant future now, so stay tuned for that. And rounding out the European history section is The Third Reich and Power by Richard J. Evans. This is the third in a trilogy of books, one about the Third Reich at different stages of its history, mostly, the Nazis rising up to power, the Nazis in power, and the Nazis in the war. So, that is what I need to get the other 2 volumes. I need to get the Third Reich in War, and I also need to get the Rise of the Nazis. So hopefully I'll find some use for this. Otherwise, it's just more Nazi stuff, because that doesn't harm my YouTube channel at all. Next, we have the books that'll be going into my American history section. And opening this up, we have The Nightmare Decade, The Life and Times of Senator Joe McCarthy by Fred J. Cook. This book is one that's going to be for a project next year, most likely. In fact, a lot of my communist stuff is going to end up coming out next year, so, you know, be ready for that kind of stuff. The next book in the American history section is Empire Express, Building the First Transcontinental Railroad by David Hayward Bain. So, the thing with a lot of history books is that you get what's in the tin. Closely related to that, of course, is The House of Morgan, An American Banking Dynasty and the Rise of Modern Finance by Ron Chernow. You know, the guy who does those American biography things, the Hamilton guy, him. This is going to be useful for not only when I start doing stuff on railroads, but also when I start doing my monetary history stuff that you may have seen me talk about in the community tab. So keep an eye out for this stuff. And rounding out the American history section is Andrew Carnegie by David Nasaw. And similar reason for why I have Morgan in that Express video. You know, it's all about future videos about industrialization and the economy, because I want to start doing a little more of that stuff. The final 3 books don't really have a neat section that they could all fall into, so just call this Other. First we have Calendar, Humanity's Epic Struggle to Determine a True and Accurate Year by David Ewing Duncan. A few other educational creators have made videos about this subject, and I want to do one as well, but I'm going to have to wait a while to get around to it, but I'm glad I have the book for when I eventually do get around to making a video about calendars. I then have a book that's more of a social sciences book called Alone Together, Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other by Sherry Turkle. Bright yellow copy, came out in 2011. There might be some interesting stuff. I don't know if it'll be used for a video, an article, or anything. I just felt it'd be interesting, and the fact that it came out almost a decade ago now might give us a little, a neat perspective. And finally, this book is one of I'm happiest to have, not because of the subject of the book itself, but because of the author. The New Paradigm for Financial Markets, The Credit Crisis of 2008 and What It Means by George Soros. George Soros is the big conspiracy man, and I've been wanting to make a video about him for a while. Something I would love to do is I would love to make a video about him and then not cover the conspiracy theory stuff at all. Just like completely ignore the existence of it and have it be a kind of troll for all of those conspiracy theorist nonsense. The reason I haven't gotten much closer to it is this is the first hard copy source of it I've been able to acquire. I have some digital copies of a few things, but it's actually, his books are actually pretty hard to get a hold of. At least they're hard to get a hold of for a reasonable price. Like, I don't know if there's just a limited print run on everything he writes or what, but it's difficult. And so if I do make that George Soros video, like I really want to, I want it to be almost exclusively his writing and his words that it's being based on. Just so I can say, it's not conspiracy theory, this is everything he's saying about himself, and display that there. Because guess what? You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to not like or trust George Soros or to think he's up to something fishy or shady, because there's plenty of that stuff around. You don't need conspiracy theories to find dirt on this guy. Anyways, that is my first history haul. Maybe I'll do stuff like this again in the future when I need more time to work on better content. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Oh, by the way, just a reminder, fill out the survey in the description below, the 2019 Casual Historian Audience Survey. Thanks again, and see you later.